Alright, just finished training. Oh man! From not being able to bench 135 pounds to lifting 220. Is Joe Fazer's advice in this video legit? Should you listen to him? You're about to find out. A few months ago, a popular fitness YouTuber from the UK posted a video entitled "How I Grew My Chest Fast." In this episode, Joe discussed his personal struggle to grow his pecs as well as his journey to eventually lift a 2-plate bench press. Then he went on to share the 3 changes he had implemented in his training prior to benching 100 kg. According to him, these tweaks helped him grow his chest, which later on translated into a better force output in the bench press. So today I'm going to analyze each of these changes because, interestingly enough, the two of us came up with very similar strategies to tackle a lagging body part and to break through a plateau in this lift. So today I'll be comparing the two approaches, Joe's and mine. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share a controversial thought that could piss many people off here on YouTube, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's play Joe's video and react to it.
My bench press has always sucked.
Let me explain my situation. No, not about this photo. This is just me being a fucking idiot.
I still remember this video. He miscalculated his 1 rep max attempt and things went pear-shaped. But you know what? Failure doesn't take away from how epic this clip is, so respect for trying, man, and sharing.
But my situation on why my bench sucks. See, this is me a few years ago after first starting the gym. Ever since then, there has only been 2 things I've cared about. Number 1, getting bigger, and number 2, getting stronger. But genetically, as a very skinny guy, this was hard.
Yeah, the first thing I like to address here is genetics. Yes, genetics do play a massive role in everything fitness related. Sometimes it does baffle me the fact that society at large has no problem in accepting that there are some people that are taller than others, smarter, faster, bigger, whatever. But when it comes to strength and hypertrophy training, many people get so worked up, so frustrated when they see a friend make progress at a much faster rate. You could go cry in a corner and feel sorry for yourself, or you could put in the work regardless, even if it takes 5 times longer to get the same results. I know it sounds harsh and very unfair, but nature isn't fair and it doesn't give a crap about your feelings anyway.
So throughout the years, I trained heavy, progressively overloaded, and ate like a whale.
Alright, eating like a whale, wow. That's a pretty blunt description, and perhaps this is what he must have felt at the time. But I understand why he would describe his nutrition in such a way, just for the sake of the flow in a fast-paced video, so I'm okay with that. As a former teenager myself, yes, to eat 3 to 4 nutrient-dense meals every day of the week is very uncomfortable and time-consuming. Your stomach is not used to it, and it needs some time to adapt and to expand. But even though you might perceive this tedious process as eating like a whale or a pig or a wolf or whatever, you're just eating like a typical person who lifts weights regularly in the gym. Besides, when you're a teenager, you just want to be out and about, hanging out with your friends, and eating food around the clock is the least of your concerns, so I totally get it. The reason why I'm spending so much time talking about weight is because your body weight has a massive impact on your bench press. You can't escape the law of physics when it comes to moving external weights. Mass moves mass. The heavier you are, the more weight you're going to be able to bench. That extra padding, that extra fluff is going to improve your leverages for the lift, and that will increase your numbers very rapidly. I just want to make this clear because Joe doesn't seem to address it directly in this video, but for all of you skinny guys out there, this is one of the best things you can do to boost your bench press. Gain weight, but please use some common sense. Don't go all bloat lord status. You would want to gain weight gradually over the years. I'm roughly 20 pounds heavier than I was in 2018. That means 4 to 5 extra pounds of weight to my frame every year for the last 4 years. A weight increase like that should be a multi-year process for most beginner lifters. Unless you dirty bulk, of course, which I don't recommend. The healthiest way to gain quality mass is by giving your metabolism some time to adapt and to become accustomed to a bigger version of yourself. Do not become fat in the process, please. You'll eventually regret it anyway, and you'll be spending plenty of time trying to undo the damage. Remember, the slow and steady turtle always wins the race.
And while my progress wasn't as fast as all of my mates, over the years, I eventually got stronger and built up some relatively respectful lifts. A 150 kg squat, a 180 kg deadlift.
Yes! But my bench was still shit.
So Joe puts in the work, hits the gym consistently for years, and gets stronger over time. So naturally, he puts on quality weight on his frame. Based on his numbers on the squat and deadlift, we could argue that he's no longer a beginner lifter, although he feels like his bench press is lagging. I feel you, bro. We're in the same boat. The bench press has never been my strongest suit either. Despite years of working out, he could barely lift 200 pounds at the time, which also happens to be around the same weight where things started to stall for me.
One eternity later.
Going from 135 to 200 on the bench press was relatively easy, but then progress got hard to come by. The main difference perhaps here is the way we looked at the same result. Joe makes it sound like this is some sort of disappointment, something negative. And to that I have to say, I respectfully disagree. I think this is a perfect example where comparing yourself to others and being too emotionally invested in a lift could hurt you. Social media could be a discouraging place for many, especially considering that powerlifting has a major presence on all platforms, which means that absolute strength in the big three is glorified at the expense of other things. Don't be so hard on yourself, man. It seems like the bench press is a lift that neither of us is going to excel at in absolute terms, but relative to our previous numbers, we've made great strides and we will keep making progress for many years to come, and that's what we all should care about. Unless you compete in powerlifting.
After years of working out, I could barely even lift 90 kilos. And in addition, my chest was my worst looking muscle group, by far.
Clearly how I was training my chest was not working.
So around 3 months ago, I changed up my chest training completely.
Alright, this is where things start getting really interesting. As a result of lifting for years, working on his craft, learning about himself, and figuring out what works for him, he decided to explore other options because the just get stronger mantra was not translating into a bigger chest for him. Look, once you've maximized your leverages and technique through an arch, body tightness, leg drive, wide grip, and all that, you've pretty much tapped out how mechanically strong of a position you can assume for the bench press. Sure, you can continue to get stronger by getting better at the skill of neurologically recruiting your existing muscle fibers, but if that is your main focus, are you gonna get more muscular in the process? Unless you are a high respondent to the bench press, you could be better off focusing on other lifts to hypertrophy the primary muscle movers of the bench press. This phase right here is what every intermediate lifter has to go through eventually. Once you've got a few solid years of proper training under your belt, you're gonna have to discard the things that don't work for you and zero in on the things that you respond best to. The only way for you to figure this out is by going to the gym and train, putting in the work, trial and error. Your job is to find out what works for you. That's what the rest of your lifting journey is gonna be about for the most part anyway.
And in that small time frame, my bench has blown up, finally getting that sweet 100 kilos. And to make things even better, in this small 3-month time period, my chest has drastically grown in size, looking a whole lot fuller.
Joe's change in mindset is key here, and this is a point that I like to drive home. He shifts his approach from trying to get stronger at the barbell flat bench press to focus on growing the primary muscle movers of this lift. Something which doesn't require the barbell flat bench press and can be done through a variety of other lifts as you're about to see. And in addition to hitting this 100 kilogram bench press milestone, he's got a fuller pectoralis to show for. So we might want to pay attention to what he did.
I want to share with you the 3 changes I made which got me a stronger and a bigger looking chest in such a short amount of time.
Tip number 1, stop bench pressing.
You're probably very confused right now, but let me explain. For me, I've never really felt much activation on the traditional flat bench press. It wasn't overly stimulating and I could never progress on it. I mean, realistically, the only reason I did it was because it's like the most famous exercise ever. So I assumed it must be the best for my chest. Oh, how I was wrong.
Yeah, I had the same issue. And I'm pretty sure that Joe and I aren't alone here. He said that he never felt a very strong mind-muscle connection while doing the barbell flat bench press, but he was still doing it because of social pressure basically. If you go to the gym to get bigger and stronger as a teenager, the expectation of your peers is that you have to do the flat bench press with the barbell. That way you can engage in the typical big measuring contest of who is the strongest alpha in the room among your friends. But the question I'd like to ask you is this: do you lift to beat your mates or impress others? Or do you lift to become bigger and stronger? Because if your answer to the last question was yes, then you'll eventually have to use the methods and exercises that are going to get you the results that you want, regardless of whether these are flashy or fancy enough to be shared on social media. Thinking that the bench press was the best exercise for him to grow his chest was at the root of the problem. In compliance with the strict guidelines of the powerlifting party, he had equated this lift with the best possible tool to grow his pecs. He finally opens his eyes to this very dogmatic view and admits that his exercise selection for that particular point in time in his lifting career was a mistake.
Instead of the flat bench press, more recently I've switched to the incline dumbbell press, and that was the best decision of my life. This is a much more superior movement as you can better activate your pecs and get a fuller range of motion, ultimately leading to a bigger and stronger chest.
I agree. For many people, relying entirely on the barbell flat bench press to grow their chest might not be the best idea. In the video, Joe claims to feel a much higher muscle activation in the pectoralis when doing the incline dumbbell bench press. Personally, I feel a much more acute stretch in my pecs when I do a bench press with dumbbells.
Now, like the traditional bench press, you still want to make sure you're focusing on progressive overload, trying to over time lift the heavier and heavier dumbbells. When I first started incline dumbbell pressing, I only just got the 55s for 9. Now, your boy's repping the 85s. Please trust me, move to the incline dumbbell press as your main pressing movement and you'll love it.
He works his way up on the dumbbell rack. I personally started in the low 20s and worked my way up to only 30 kilograms. However, judging from the short clip in the video, I can see that he doesn't go all the way down with the dumbbells, and that's fine. Neither does he make a pause at the bottom in order to remove the elastic recoil that helps the lifter during the transition phase. That's definitely going to allow you to make faster progress on the load side of things, but intensity isn't the only thing you should focus on if your goal is hypertrophy. He went for a more intensity-driven approach, which is absolutely fine, but bear in mind that this inherently has a much higher injury risk. Whereas I'm more comfortable using a method based on a technique that would make the exact same exercise much harder using less weight. I prefer to go all the way down and then I try to pause at the bottom to spend some extra time in a loaded stretch when the pectoralis is at its longest position, which seems to be a part of a lift that causes superior muscle damage. At the end of the day, the goal is muscular fatigue, and you can reach that goal through different paths. The only main difference I should point out is that I was doing two variations of this lift, one with an incline bench and another one with a flat one. But yes, dumbbells could be a game changer for many of us.
Tip number 2, adding an extra chest session.
You see, originally I ran a 4-day-a-week upper-lower split. So Monday was upper body, Tuesday was lower body, Wednesday rest, Thursday upper body, Friday lower body, Saturday, Sunday rest.
Yep, an upper-lower split twice a week is one of the most efficient ways to train in my opinion. I did train that way for the most part of 2021 and I made great progress.
However, after realizing how much my chest was lacking in my physique, I decided to add an additional push session into the week. Monday upper, Tuesday lower, Wednesday rest, Thursday upper, Friday lower, but then on Saturday, a push session, and then Sunday rest.
When it comes to hypertrophy, devoting an entire training session to a particular muscle or muscle groups is a great idea. I would have gone down that path myself, but truth be told, here in Spain we were still dealing with virus-related restrictions, so it was mandatory to train with a mask in the gym, which is highly uncomfortable and distracting, so no fun in doing that. So what I decided to do to save me the extra trip to the gym was to sneak in an isolation chest exercise into my lower body session. Essentially train my chest in some capacity 4 times per week. Although Joe and I took different paths, we sort of arrived at the same place, which is that lagging body parts require extra training volume.
Adding this extra volume did nothing but further develop my physique. I would make sure to go a bit lighter on this Saturday to avoid too much strain on my shoulders, and purely on this day just focus on mind-muscle connection. You see, if you have a lacking muscle group, even if it's not your chest, I would highly recommend adding an extra day devoted to that muscle, because it really helped me out.
Just FYI, now that all the restrictions have been lifted, I'm currently completing an extra session that focuses on muscle groups that don't get enough growth stimulus during compound lifts. For me, that'd be calves, arms, forearms, and side delts. Here's the thing, if you're really serious about pursuing aesthetics, this step is almost unavoidable. You must have a day that is laser focus specific on particular muscle groups.
Tip number 3, this beauty of an exercise.
So I stopped doing this exercise and instead
I changed it up to this variation.
I f***ing love this exercise.
When it comes to mind-muscle connection and really burning your chest out, I don't think there's an exercise that can beat this.
Here's what I'd recommend. Do 3 sets at the end of your session. Set number 1 is a heavy set to failure. Rest for 2 minutes and then put the pin down by 1. Then do another set to failure. Rest a further 2 minutes and move the pin down by another 1. Then your final set to failure again.
Really squeeze those pecs.
So here we see Joe demonstrating a seated cable fly drop set to complete at the end of the workout to finish off his chest.
And that kills your chest.
What is important to keep in mind to put things into perspective here is that both the drop set style and the exercise selection are just Joe's choice as a tool to comply with the following 2 principles: that lagging body parts require extra volume, and isolation movements that encourage a good mind-muscle connection. The point I'm trying to make here is that you don't need to copy what Joe did. You don't need to copy me either. You just need to make sure that you meet these 2 requirements. This is why having a bare minimum knowledge on resistance training could prevent you from taking people's advice at face value and simply copy whatever fitness influencer shares on social media. As a beginner, you should only follow basic time-tested training principles. That way, you're not gonna fall for all the gimmicky, clickbaity, and useless advice that is constantly uploaded online. Speaking of knowledge, the most effective way to isolate the pectoralis muscle is through movements that train shoulder horizontal adduction, which is a key anatomical function of the chest. Joe goes for that variation, but any movement that allows you to train the sweeping motion of bringing your arms in front and across will do. Once you understand that, it all comes down to your personal preference. Not Joe's, not mine, not anyone's. Yours. You don't have to be married to any particular lift. As long as you train the same movement pattern, you can continue to make progress. As I said at the beginning of this video, I'd like to leave you with a rather controversial thought. To my mind, all of you skinny dudes out there are much better off listening to weak benchers like Joe and I, rather than famous people with watermelon pecs putting out elite numbers on the bench press. Let me explain to you why. For once, you are likely to have a much similar starting point than us, meaning that the steps that we took to raise our bench from the low hundreds to the 200s are most likely going to be almost identical to what you are going to have to do to get a 2-plate bench. That is, lift gradually heavier weights, improve your technique, do not neglect isolation lifts, gain weight over time, and break through plateaus through trial and error. Joe's video corresponds to the last innings of the beginner phase for the bench press, meaning that if you haven't gotten down all these 5 things that I mentioned before, his video is irrelevant to you. Just like watching an elite lifter who's sharing a workout where his goal is to hit a 600-pound bench press is an absolute waste of your time. In fact, if you dig deeper and you watch interviews of these bench press specialists, a typical story that you're gonna hear multiple times is that they were already benching in the high 200s or even 300 pounds at high school. That's the anomaly, and you should never compare yourself to the exception, because they are exceptional to begin with, and statistically speaking, you are not. The typical weak and clueless teenager lifting weights in the gym for the first time in his life has nothing to do with these people. Their respective contexts stand at the extreme ends of this spectrum, and because training advice must always be contextual, you have no business implementing the 3 tips for a massive bench press by Julius Maddox, or the secret exercise the pros don't want you to know for a fuller chest by Michael Hearn, or some shit show like that. You should listen to someone who is starting in the same position as you currently are and just moved slightly higher on that spectrum, even if their performance is not as impressive in absolute terms. Just some food for thought. Speaking of which, I gotta eat. Check out these 2 videos, I think you're gonna like them. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell to get notified every time a new video goes live. Stay fit, stay strong, help me raise an army of Super Saiyans all around the world. Peace.